Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. In this audio podcast series, the LabZtorm, the LabZtorm Effect v.3. This is an audio podcast aligned to the role of endogenous opioids in ischaemic preconditioning, or IPC, in humans. This is an audio podcast aligned to the measurement of ischaemic-reperfusion, or IR, induced endothelial function. This is an audio podcast aligned to Storm Lobostics soliloquy, and also aligned to another Storm Lobostics production. So this the previous audio podcast, I looked at introduced in some context or basis in around the use of where the human forearm model had been a basis for research in around ischaemic-reperfusion injury and sort of retrospectively, and where there was in line to sort of the research utilizing sort of non-invasive ultrasound studies or investigations to measure and identify flow-mediated dilatation, or FMD, enables a visualization of endothelial function in ischaemic-reperfusion injury. Now, in this in following measurement of in line to measurement of ischaemic-reperfusion induced endothelial function, aligned to this flow mediated flow mediated dilatation, or FMD, is once again a sort of a non-invasive way of assessing endothelial function in vivo. Flow-mediated dilatation is also a measure of endothelium-dependent vasodilation observed in response to, for example, shear stress. So shear stress in this context is, for example, if you imagine the forearm model, or the forearm basic, where the forearm in context of the forearm, or even a lower limb, where shear stress is concerned, is where the larger veins or arteries, for example, in context of anatomy and physiology. Shear stress is where particular veins and arteries can intake a force, a force or a stress in context of blood flow. And so the right forearm, in context of research, the right forearm in research, and where sort of retrospective research had been implemented, the right forearm is occluded for 5 minutes, for up to 5 minutes, using sort of a blood pressure cuff, causing brief ischemia. This causes shear stress. And in turn endothelial cells to generate, for example, nitrous oxide. Visible vasodilatation, an increase in diameter of the brachial artery in response to increased blood flow. Can then be observed using ultrasound. So assessing flow-mediated dilatation in context of shear stress, or where shear stress is implemented, assessing of flow-mediated dilatation has been documented as being reliable and also reproducible. There are also invasive investigations and techniques for measuring endothelial function, for determining and measuring endothelial function in this way as well. Works by Carbanda and team in 2001 had utilized FMD to investigate the effects of ischaemic-reperfusion on endothelial function in vivo, and also examined the protection afforded by ischaemic preconditioning. Works by Mullen and team in 2001 utilizes flow-mediated dilatation investigations to assess conduit arteries in recipients with particular cardiovascular complications. Works by Georgakis and team in 2006 had demonstrated or highlighted that post conditioning can also protect endothelial, or POC can protect against endothelial ischemic reperfusion injury in humans. And so in the research that had taken place aligned to a collaborative effort between University College London and King's College London, the team assessed brachial arterial and the brachial artery endothelial function by vascular ultrasound to measure flow-mediated dilatation. And flow-mediated dilatation investigations to assess endothelial have been documented as mechanistically have been documented as mechanistically as being non-invasive, and also assessing endothelial and also allowing the identification in around general for example, to identify whether there's a sclerosis, or where there can be some other where there can be some other issue around anatomy, around anatomy or physiology. Now, the research that had taken place looked at had involved the measurement of ischemic reperfusion induced endothelial function in human healthy volunteers to understand whether there is a basis of the role of endogenous opioids in ischemic preconditioning, or whether there's a basis around ischemic preconditioning in humans in around this works. And so this draws this audio podcast to a close. This has been an audio podcast aligned to the LabZtorm effect v.3, an audio podcast in around the measurement of ischemic reperfusion induced endothelial function, or IR induced endothelial function, aligned to an audio podcast in around the role of endogenous opioids in ischemic preconditioning, or IPC, in humans, and another Storm Robotics soliloquy and another Storm Robotics production. Thank you.